Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Alan Murphy. I'm the pastor of New Barn Christian Fellowship in Dartford in Kent. The times in which we live, we're not able to meet together face to face, so I thought I would do some teaching on YouTube for the benefit of my own fellowship, but also for the benefit of anyone else who wants to tune in and hopefully be blessed. Today's Mother's Day, as you know, so I bought a little flower just to wave and say God bless you, all those mums, and God bless all the ladies of our fellowship. And without you, the fellowship wouldn't be what it is today. I've no idea what this flower is, but it's the only one I could find in my front garden. All the daffodils have disappeared. So if you know what it is, you can let me know. But God bless you all. And I thought it was appropriate to look at a mum in the Bible, and there's no guesses as to where we're going to go, really. We're going to look at a couple of things in Proverbs 31. It's really listed or described in your Bible as the noble woman. So if you want to turn to your Bibles in Proverbs 31, that'll be good. And I'm not going to read the passage, but I'm just going to pick out a few bits, and really this is a bit of a Hebrew word study. I love the Hebrew. I feel it's something that brings out the best and the deepest of the Bible. So if you're into that, then that's great. If you're not, then hopefully you'll get a thirst for this type of study. So we're going to be looking at Hebrews 31. And now when I mention Hebrews 31, particularly in the company of women, their initial reaction is to cower and to think, well, I'm not really like that, and they feel a bit intimidated by the lady in the passage. Well, that's not the purpose of the writer. The purpose of the writer is to extol certainly the woman in the passage, but also to encourage other women to use that as an inspiration for their own lives. But it's also a passage very much for the men, because in Jewish families, the man actually sings this passage to his wife or girlfriend or daughters. And so it's very much a passage for the men as well as the women. And of course, the principles that are there really refer to us both. So the first thing I wanted to look at is the actual title, and it's in verse 10 as well. It says, you've got a little bit above verse 10, which says the wife of a noble character. And in verse 10, it says a wife of noble character, who can find? Now, when we think of noble or nobility in our English language, I don't know what you think of, but we probably think of in terms of nobility, privilege, people of a royal dynasty, but it's not like that at all in the Hebrew. And although noble is one of the words that could be translated, I think probably the translators could have used a better word in our versions, particularly the NIV version. Now, the word, I use Strong's Concordance, as many people do who are into the Hebrew. The word is, and I've written it down for you, I'm told that when I hold it up to the screen that it will be the right way round. It's Eshet Chayil. Eshet Chayil. I don't know if you want to write that down. Eshet Chayil. Eshet Chayil. And what that really means is a woman of valor. A woman of valor. So when we think of valor, we think of strength, and the references and the descriptions of the word in our Strong's Concordance tell us that it's being brave, being courageous, being a hero or a heroine. So it's not really about being noble as regards of a privileged position. It's about someone who is brave. And that's really important because very often in our society, we are defined by our roles. We find value in our roles. People find value in their job. And certainly, as I said earlier on, when I mention this to people, they feel a little bit inadequate as regards of all the jobs that this woman does. Well, it's not about the amount of jobs that she does or how important the jobs are. It's really about the way she goes about the jobs. So you can see that whatever job you're doing, be it a high job or a low job or whatever it is, it's the way we go about our job. And this is what comes through in this passage when we read, or when you read separately to our little study now, the way that she goes about her work. You read things like she goes about her work diligently. She gets up at night and all that sort of thing. She's not lazy. She's industrious. She's wise. She's sensible. Now, all those things we are able to attain. We're not able to attain the amount of jobs possibly that she did or the importance of them, but we are able to attain the attitude in which she went about the jobs. Now, just as a cross-reference in Ruth chapter 3, if you'd like to turn to Ruth chapter 3, and I like using my paper Bible, so you have to bear with me while I find the passage. And this is where I put my reading glasses on. But in Ruth chapter 3 and verse 11, we find exactly the same phrase in this verse as we do in Proverbs 31. And Boaz is speaking to Ruth, and he says in verse 11, "And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All my fellow townsmen know about that you are a woman of noble character." And that's exactly the same phrase. It's a woman of noble character. It's Eshet Chayil. And when you look at Ruth, you don't see someone who was privileged. You don't see someone of the nobility, which bears out what we said earlier on. You see someone who was quite lowly. You see someone who was in the fields, possibly on her knees. They had come back after a time of away of tragedy and trauma, but it's the way that Ruth goes about her business in this story. And we don't have time to develop all that, but you look at the book, you read through the book, she does what she's told, she follows advice, but she goes about it vigorously, industriously. And I think they're qualities that we can have today, of course. So the whole point is being brave, all right? And it's not about being big. It's not about being physically strong. Saul was definitely that, but we know what happened to him. And it's about the inner strength. It's about what's happening inside that very often sets us apart from other people. And it's the inner strength which gives us the outward expression of how God is able to use us and how we are able to affect situations. So that's the first little word, chayil. Okay, it means to be brave. And I think we could apply that to ourselves, and we could think, well, okay, so how brave are we? Are we brave in situations? Are we going about our work and the things that God has given us to do in a brave, courageous way? Or are we timid? And we know the Bible says in Timothy, you know, God has not given you and me a spirit of timidity, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. So this woman in Proverbs 31, she is a brave woman. She's full of courage. And I think that, and I really believe that is attainable to all of us in our Christian lives. Now, there's another word which is linked to chayil, and it's the root of chayil, and it's just called kil. Kil. So it's C-H-I-Y-L. And that's the root of chayil. It's chil. Okay? So if you can see that, you can write that down. Chil. Now, there's a lot more to the meaning of this word, which really gives us an insight and a backup to the whole courage and valor bit. Because chil, which is a root word of chayil, means to twist or to twirl around as if you were dancing. It means to writhe in pain and to carve, C-A-L-V-E, to carve, to bring forth calves. In other words, it's a picture of the pain of childbirth. And what I want you to see is that the strength that we have, the chayil, comes from a root of chil, okay, which means all these things that we've just mentioned: to twist, to turn around, to writhe in pain, etc., etc. And very often our strength comes from the fact that we have experienced pain. We have experienced this twisting and this turning. And our traumas and our tragedies are the circumstances and the tools which God uses to bring us to a point of being courageous. And if we don't have those difficult situations, then we don't develop. We don't become strong. And if we had a choice, we would say, well, Lord, I want to be strong, but I don't want to go through the process of becoming strong. And, you know, when God says in the Bible to Joshua, for example, be strong and very courageous. I've seen some translations that say become strong and very courageous. Having strength isn't necessarily an instantaneous thing. Having strength is built up over a period of time. It's a process where you are getting stronger. So God says, become strong. And the way we become strong is by going through the difficulties of life, which we are facing exactly at the moment, aren't we? Not just as a nation, but all over the world. I was reading about Walt Disney, and we know him, and we only really, I suppose, think of him in terms of success. You know, he's been very, very successful and with all his films and all the rest of it. But we may not know that when he first wanted to get, you know, his career off the ground, he was rejected 300 times or over 300 times by banks, financiers, etc., who wouldn't give him the money because they didn't believe in him. But he carried on and he carried on, and he even became an actor, and he failed at that. But while he was an actor, he created a little figure called Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. And Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, in Walt Disney's failure, became Mickey Mouse in Walt Disney's success. So we can see that he really, really was rejected time and time again. But because he carried on, because he went about his difficult circumstances the right way, and in fact never gave up, eventually he came to a position where he did succeed. And this woman in Proverbs 31 knows all about pain. It speaks about her husband. It speaks about her children. So she knows what it's like to experience that pain in childbirth. She knows what it's like, as we read in the passage, to get up or not even to go to bed, but to work through the night for the sake of her family. And so when we see and we read about her in this passage, we're reading a picture of a successful woman, but we don't know the process that she had to go through to reach that point. And that's the hidden bit. That's the bit that we don't always see when we're looking at these situations. And I mentioned earlier on about the root of a word. Well, very often the root, if you think of a tree, the root is not seen. So you don't know what's going on with the root, but you just see the fruit. And very often, you know, perhaps we despair because no one understands what we're going through. No one sees it. No one can identify it possibly. But you need to know that God can see what you're going through. And he can see the root that's hidden with other people. And what he wants is he wants you to show the fruit of his life within you, really. The fruit of his life within you. And so that's something about this woman. And as I said earlier on, the times in which we live with the coronavirus are very desperate times. I've certainly known nothing like it in my lifetime. And I believe that through this difficult situation, you know, God always, doesn't he? He's always able to bring hope. He's always able to bring life from the dead and all those lovely things that we read in the Bible about what God is able to do, not just in the lives of the biblical people, but in the lives of our families, in your life, in my life. And we need to grasp that hope in the times in which we live and see that God can bring good out of this situation. I was looking at my fridge the other day because there's a lot of talk, isn't there, about food and not having food and going to the supermarkets and the shelves being empty. And we've seen pictures, haven't we? And we've heard things about people who have been disappointed once they've got there. Well, I have to say that, and there probably is a very, very fine line between trusting God and being irresponsible. So I think some of the things that we see in people's lives where they've exercised great faith, some of the things we read in the Bible where people have exercised great faith, and naturally speaking, we can look at that and think that was an irresponsible move. And anyway, I just took a picture of my fridge. Now that's the inside door of my fridge. You can see I've got quite, they're all jars of sauces and stuff. I don't know why I've got so many, but anyway, that's the inside of my fridge, the door of my fridge. And I took this other picture just to show you. That is my fridge. Now at the top you've got more jars of sauce, and then on the second shelf, I can't really tell what that is from here, but then you've got a bit of margarine. I think I had 2 slices of bread, about 3 waffles, and about 2 or 3 eggs. You see down the bottom it's all empty. Now, you might look at that and think, goodness me, how irresponsible. Why don't you go out and get some food? Well, I just haven't really got round to it. But I looked at my fridge and I thought, well, I suppose I'd better go out and get some food. But, you know, inside of me, there was a real peace. I didn't feel I should panic about food or anything like that. And I didn't. But anyway, I thought I should go out. So I went out, and as I was driving, I said to the Lord, Lord, what would I do if there was one loaf of bread and there was me and there was someone else going for this loaf? What would I do? And of course, you know, it's a bit of a thing where you think, well, that's never going to happen. So I said, well, of course, I would give it to the other person. Anyway, so with that in mind, I went to Lidl's first, and if you walk into Lidl's in Dartford, I pick up a bunch of flowers that I buy from time to time. I put it in my basket, and I wheeled into the store, and it was jam-packed. There were people everywhere, and I looked along the aisles, and there were 4 or 5 aisles, and they were all very, very long. And I thought, well, I'm not going to stay in here. I'm not going to spend 2.5 hours, you know, getting a few bits of food. So I gave my flowers to the security guard, and I said, there you are, you can have them back. And I walked out. And then I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll go down to my local co-op, which is where I should have gone really at first. So I went down to my local co-op, and there were 2 people in there. And I thought, oh, this is good. So I immediately felt blessed, the fact that I was going to be in and out in about 15 or 20 minutes. Now, I know it's more expensive, but I'd sooner pay a little bit more than wait for 2 hours, I suppose. Anyway, I put a few bits in my basket, and I was walking around, and I came to the bread counter, and I couldn't see, there was no bread there at all. There's about 3 shelves, no bread. So I ended up getting a French stick. And this chap came up to me, and he said, oh, you know, I've only got this small, it was about a half loaf, really. He said, my son came round yesterday and ate most of our bread. And he was in a bit of despair, really. So I said, oh, no. And we spoke generally. Well, as we were walking towards the queue where you pay, I looked down and I saw on the bottom shelf, right at the back, this just 1 loaf of bread. So I thought, oh, I'll have that. So anyway, so I went back behind this chap. I bent down, and I got this loaf out. He went, oh, you lucky blighter. Fancy you getting that loaf. And I remembered what I'd said to the Lord about half an hour before, that if I had a loaf of bread and there was somebody else who wanted it, what would I do? So anyway, so I said to him, I said, well, do you want my loaf? He said, oh, really? I said, yeah, you can have it. So I gave him my loaf, which was a big, nice, white, thick loaf, and he gave me his little sort of half loaf. And I was really blessed to be able to do that. And he was really blessed to be able to receive what I'd given him. And I think the point of all that really is that God can use you. It doesn't matter what we've been through, and it's how we've been through it. And it doesn't matter about the end result, it's about how we have conducted ourselves through that trial and through that tribulation. Because we look around, don't we, and we read and we see panic, we see fear, we see greed and selfishness, you know, and we've seen that NHS worker who was in tears because of her long shifts, and when she went to the shop there was nothing left, and all that sort of thing. And people can become quite selfish. Well, God calls you and me to something better. He calls us to something different. And in this day and age in which we live, we have the opportunity to shine in a dark place. We have the opportunity to really allow Jesus to come through our trauma. And I've got this prayer of St. Francis of Assisi that I wanted to read to you. And you probably know it very well, but I wanted to read it anyway because it's just lovely, the words. And there are different renderings of the words, depending on where you get your words from. But it says, Lord, make me a channel of your peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love, that where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness, that where there is discord, I may bring harmony, that where there is error, I may bring truth, that where there is doubt, I may bring fruit, that where there is despair, I may bring hope, that where there are shadows, I may bring light, that where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds. It is by forgiving that one is forgiven. It is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. Don't worry, I haven't got the virus, just a few little coughs there. So I hope you've understood something of what I've tried to put across this afternoon. It's now 4:20 on the Sunday afternoon, and I'm aware you might only be listening to this on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday by the time you get round to it. But just to summarize, really, just think of those few little words that we looked at. That chayil, meaning strong, somebody of valor, somebody of brave, and the root word heal, which is about twisting and writhing in pain and going through the mill, really, going through difficult situations. Now, I don't just want to leave it there, really, but I want to say to you that if you have a situation that you're finding overwhelming, there doesn't seem to be any answer, then I believe my Jesus, my friend Jesus, can help you. If you're a Christian and you know Jesus, then you can bring it to him, can't you, in prayer, and just talk to him about it. And I know by doing that, a tremendous difference can be made in your life. If you're not a Christian and you don't know Jesus and you happen to be listening to this, then why don't you give Jesus a chance to make a difference in your life? That's why he died on the cross. That's why when you think about it, when he was on the cross, he did writhe in pain. He did go through that twisting and turning. But through it, his courage and his calling and his love for you and for me gave him the strength. And he was the bravest man who ever lived. And that's the Jesus of Nazareth that we read about in the Bible. So just to reiterate, my name's Alan Murphy, and you can email me at alan.murphy90@outlook.com if you want to comment on this talk, if you want to ask any questions or in any way contact me. You can contact me through that email address, and I can tell you a bit more about the passage. I can tell you about our church if you're interested, but please feel free to come back to me with your comments. Because we're in this situation of not being able to meet, I do intend to record a message weekly, and it should be ready in the Sundays coming up. It should be ready by 11 o'clock every Sunday morning. So you can use that as part of your personal service if you want to, or you can listen to it any other time. So the Lord bless you and keep you, and make his face to shine upon you and give you peace. And yeah, so hopefully you've enjoyed this and you've understood something of what I've been able to try and get across. And I'll see you next Sunday. Okay, God bless you. Bye-bye.